Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Spinning Sagas with Sunita. So, how have you been? Hope you've had a good time, kept your faith, and like I said last time, just one step at a time, one day at a time. So today I bring to you a most interesting story. And if some of my writer friends are here, I'd like to tell them that this story is about a writer. Where does the inspiration come from when one writes stories or poems? Yeah, hi, Ampat Koshi sir. So, and I hope Santosh Di is here because the genre I'm talking about, she writes a lot in that. So today I'm going to tell you a story which has been written by Elsie Brown. She's an American she was an American short story writer. She was born in 2nd January 1870 and passed away in 1965. She has written quite a few ghost stories. And hi Sadbirdi. And so this one is also a ghost story. Santosh Di, hi. And it is called A Shady Plot. Mahua, hello. So it's a little longish, so I'll start right away without further ado. So this is where the inspiration comes from. We writers think that the inspiration is coming from. Sometimes the inspiration comes, you'll see where it comes from. So this is about a writer. His name is John Halleck. So here I start. So I sat down to write a ghost story. Jenkins was responsible. Halleck, he said to me, give us another on the supernatural this time. Something to give them the horrors. That's what the public wants. And your ghosts are live propositions. Well, I was in no position to contradict Jenkins, for as yet his magazine had been the only one to print my stuff. So I said, precisely, in the deepest voice I was capable of, and went out. I hadn't the shade of an idea, but at the time, that didn't worry me in the least. You see, I had often been like that before, and in the end, things had always come my way. I didn't know how or why. It had all been rather mysterious. You understand, I didn't specialize in ghost stories. More or less, they seemed to specialize in me. A ghost story had been the first fiction I had written. Curious how that idea for a plot had come to me out of nowhere after I had chased inspiration in vain for months. Just 1 minute. I think, Kartike, this is not working. Okay. I hope you all can hear me. So suddenly the inspiration came to me. So I went home and sat down before my desk and sucked at the end of my pencil and waited, but nothing happened. Pretty soon my mind began to wander off on other things, which were rather unghostly. For example, my wife's shopping and how on earth to cure her of her alarming tendency to take every new fad. But I soon realized I could not do anything about it. So I went back to staring at the ceiling. This writing business is delightful, isn't it? I said sarcastically. to no one in particular. You see, I had reached that stage of imbecility when I was talking to myself. Yes, said a voice at the other end of the room. I should say it is. I admit, I jumped. Then I looked around. It was twilight by this time, and I had forgotten to turn on the lamp. The other end of the room was full of shadows and furniture. I sat staring at it and presently noticed something just taking shape. It was exactly like watching one of those moving picture cartoons being put together. First, an arm came out, then a bit of a sleeve of a stiff white shirtwaist, then a leg, then a plaid skirt, until at last there she was, complete, whoever she was. She was long and angular with enormous fishy eyes behind bone rimmed spectacles and a hair in a tight wad at the back of her head. Yes, I seemed able to see right through her head. And her jaw, well, it looked so solid that for the moment I began to doubt my very own senses and believed she was real after all. She came over and stood in front of me and glared. Yes, positively glared down at me. Although, to my knowledge, I had never laid eyes on the woman before, to say nothing of giving her cause to look at me like that. I sat still, feeling pretty helpless, I can tell you. And at last she barked. What are you gaping at? I swallowed, though I hadn't been chewing anything. Nothing, I said. Absolutely nothing. My dear lady, I was merely waiting for you to tell me why you had come. And excuse me, do you always come in sections like this? I should think your parts might get mixed up sometimes. Didn't you send for me? She crisped. Imagine how I felt at that. Why, no, I don't seem to remember. Look here, haven't you been calling on heaven and earth all afternoon to help you write a story? I nodded. And then a positive, possible explanation occurred to me, and my spine got cold. Suppose this was the ghost of a stenographer applying for a job. I had put out an advertisement in the paper. I opened my mouth to explain, but she stopped me. And when I got back to the office from my last case and was ready for you, didn't you switch off to something else and sit there driveling so I couldn't attract your attention until now? Uh, I'm sorry, really. I'm sorry. Well, you needn't be because I just came to tell you to stop bothering us for assistance. You ain't going to get it. We are going on strike. What? You don't have to yell at me. I didn't mean to yell at you, I said humbly, but I'm afraid I didn't quite understand you. You said you were going on strike. Don't you know what a strike is? Not another plot do you get from us. I stared at her and wet my lips. Is that where they've been coming from? Of course, where else? But my ghosts aren't a bit like if they were, people wouldn't believe in them. She draped herself on the top of my desk among the pens and ink bottles and leaned towards me. In the other life, I used to write. You did? I nodded. But that has nothing to do with my present form, you see. Uh, it might have, but I gave it up. She sighed and rubbed the end of a long eagle nose with a reminiscent finger. When I attained my present state of being, I made up my mind that something should be done. I found others like me who had suffered similarly, and between us, we organized the Writers' Inspiration Bureau. We scout around until we find a writer without ideas and with a mind soft enough to accept impression. The case is brought to the attention of the main office, and one of us is assigned to it. When that case is finished, we bring in a report. But I never saw you before, and you wouldn't have. This time also, if I hadn't come to announce the strike. Many a time I've leaned on your shoulder when you thought you were thinking hard. I groaned, oh, and clutched my hair. The very idea of that horrible scarecrow so much as touching me. Oh God. And wouldn't my wife be shocked? I shivered. But, she continued, that's at an end. We've been called out of our beds a little too often in recent years. And now we are through. But, my dear madam, I assure you, I have had nothing to do with it. I hope I'm properly grateful and all that, you see. Oh, it isn't you, she explained patronizingly. It's those Ouija board fanatics. There was a time when we had nothing much to do, and we used to haunt a little on the side purely for amusement. But not anymore. We've had to give up haunting almost entirely. We sit at a desk and answer questions, and such questions. She shook her head hopelessly and, taking off her glasses, wiped them and put them back again. But what do I have to do with it? I asked her. She gave me a pitying look and rose. You are to exert your influence. Get all your friends and acquaintances to stop using the Ouija board, and then we'll start helping you to write. But I hope I'll just ask you, I hope all of you know what a Ouija board is, planchette, where there's a board and which is used to call all these spirits. Yeah. So let me get back to it. I'll show you the pictures. You to exert your influence, get all your friends and acquaintances to stop using the Ouija board, and then I'll start helping you to write. But, there were footsteps outside my door. John, John, cried the voice of my wife. I waved my arms at the ghost with something of the motion of a beginner when learning to swim. Madam, I must ask you to leave at once. Consider the impression if you were seen here. The ghost nodded and began very sensibly, I thought, to demobilize and evaporate. First, the brogans on her feet grew misty until I could see the floor through them. Then the affection spread to her knees and gradually extended upwards. By this time, my wife was opening the door. Don't forget the strike, she repeated, while her lower jaw began to disintegrate. And as my Lavinia opened the room, the last vestige of her ear faded into space. John, why in the world are you sitting in the dark? Just thinking, my dear, just thinking. Thinking? Rubbish. You were talking out loud. I remained silent while she lit the lamps, thankful that her back was turned to me. When I am nervous or excited, there is a muscle in my face that starts to twitch, and this pulls one corner of my mouth and gives the appearance of an idiotic grin. I had managed up till now to hide this affliction from Lavinia. You know what, John? I bought the loveliest thing this afternoon. Everybody is wild over them. I remembered her craze for taking up new fads, and a premonitory chill crept up the back of my neck. Uh, it isn't. I began and stopped. I simply couldn't ask. The possibility was too horrible. You'd never guess in the world, oh John. It's the duckiest, darlingest Ouija board, and so cheap. I got it at a bargain sale. Why? What's the matter with you, John? I felt things slipping. Nothing, I said, and looked around for the ghost. Suppose she had lingered upon hearing what my wife had said and should suddenly appear. Like all sensitive women, Lavinia was subject to hysterics. Here, Lavinia carried on. But, John, you look so funny. I always do when I'm interested. I gulped. But don't you think, Lavinia, that was a foolish thing to buy? Foolish? Oh, John, foolish. After me getting it for you? For me? What do you mean? To help you write your stories, John. Why? For instance, suppose you wanted to write a historical novel. You wouldn't have to wear your eyes out over those musty old books in the public library. All you had to do would be to get out your Ouija board and talk to Napoleon or William the Conqueror or Helen of Troy. Well, maybe not Helen. Anyhow, you'd have all the local color you need and without a speck of trouble. And think how easy writing your short stories will be now. Oh, John. But Lavinia, you surely don't believe in Ouija boards. I don't know, John. They are awfully thrilling. She had seated herself on the arm of my chair and was looking dreamily across the room. I started and turned around. There was nothing there. I sank back with relief. So far, so good. Oh, certainly, they are thrilling, all right. That's just it. They're a darn sight too thrilling. They're positively devilish. Now, Lavinia, you have plenty of sense. I want you to go and get rid of that thing as soon as you can. Take it back and get back something else. My wife crossed her knee and stared at me through narrowed lids. John Halleck, she said distinctly, I don't propose to do anything of the kind. In the first place, they won't exchange things bought at a bargain sale. And in the second, if you aren't interested in the other world, I am. So there. And she got up and walked from the room before I could think of a single thing to say. It was like that for the rest of the evening. After supper, I had another try at writing, but my mind continued to be a perfect blank. I gave it up and went to bed. The next day was Saturday, and it being the end of the month and a particularly busy day, I left home early without seeing Lavinia. Well, you see, I haven't quite reached the point where I can give my whole time to writing. And being a bookkeeper for a lumber company does help with the grocery bills and pay for Lavinia's fancy shopping. When I came back in the evening, my mind was still churning, and I noticed even from the corner how brightly the house looked. But at that time, it didn't mean anything to me. I went up the steps and opened the door, murmuring something to myself. And then Gladolia met me in the hall. Mr. Hollock, dear missus, she thinks you're lost. She says she done phone you this morning to be home early. But for the Lord's sake, not to stop to argufy now, but get ready for the company and come down. Some memory of a message given to me by one of the clerks filtered back through my brain, but I had been hunting 3 lost receipts at the time and had completely forgotten. Company? I said stupidly. What company? Dear Mrs. Ouija board party, said Gludolia, and rolling her eyes, she disappeared in the direction of the kitchen. I must have gone upstairs and dressed and come down again, for I presently found myself standing in the dimly lighted lower hall, wearing my second best suit and a fresh shirt and collar. But I have no recollection of the process. There was a great chattering coming from our little parlor, and I went over to the half open door and peered through. The room was full of women, most of them elderly, whom I recognized as belonging to my wife's book club. They were sitting in couples, and between each couple was a Ouija board. The mournful squeak of the legs of the moving triangular things on which they rested their fingers filled the air and mixed in with the conversation. I'm sure all of you know what it is. There's a triangular thing on which you keep your finger and it starts moving and you ask questions. John, she says, my wife suddenly comes over. John, she said in her sweetest voice, and I noticed that her cheeks were very pink and her eyes very bright. John, dear, I know you'll help us out. Mrs. William Augustus Wainwright phoned at the last moment to say that she couldn't possibly come, and that leaves poor Laura Hinkle without a partner. Now, John, I know some people can work a Ouija by themselves, but Laura can't, and she'll have a horrible time. Oh, John, please. Me? I gasped. Me? I won't. But even as I spoke, she had taken my arm, and the next thing I knew, I was sitting with the thing on my knees and Miss Laura Hinkle opposite, grinning in my face like a flirtatious crocodile. I won't, I began. Now, Mr. Halleck, don't be so shy. Miss Laura Hinkle leaned forward and shook a bony finger almost under my chin. I'm not shy. Only I said I won't. Oh, it's very easy, really. You just put the tips of your fingers right here beside the tips of my fingers. And the first thing I knew, she had taken my hand and was coyly holding them in the position desired. She released them presently, and the little board began to slide around in an aimless sort of way. There seemed to be some force tugging it about. I looked at my partner, first with suspicion and then with vast relief. If she was doing it, then all this talk about spirits, oh, I did hope that Laura Hinkle was cheating with that board. Oh, E.J. dear, won't you tell us something? She cooed, and on the instant, the thing began to take life. It rushed to the upper left-hand corner of the board and hovered with its front leg on the word yes. Then it began to fly around so fast that I gave up any attempt to follow it. My companion was bending forward and it started to spell out loud, T-R-A, traitor. Oh, why? What does that mean? I don't know, I said desperately. My collar felt very tight. But she must mean something, Ouija dear. Won't you explain yourself more fully? Ask him, ask him, ask who, Ouija? I'm going. I choked and tried to get up, but my fingers stuck to that dreadful board and I dropped back again. Apparently, Miss Hinkle had not heard my protest. The thing was going around faster than ever, and she was reading the messages silently with her brow corrugated and the light of the huntress in her pale blue eyes. Why? She says it's you, Mr. Halleck. What does she mean? Oh, EJ, won't you tell us who is talking? I groaned. That was inexorable, but the board continued to spell. I always did hate a spelling match. Miss Hinkle was again following it loud. H-E, Helen. She raised her voice until it could be heard at the other end of the room. Lavinia, dear, do you know anyone by the name of Helen? My wife couldn't hear and made her way over to us between the book club's chairs. You know, the funniest thing has happened, she whispered excitedly. Someone has been trying to communicate with John through this Ouija board. Huh? Someone giving the name of Helen has just been calling for your husband here. But we don't know anyone by the name of Helen. Lavinia stopped and began to look at me through narrowed lids, much like she had done in the library the evening before. And then from different parts of the room, other manipulators began to report. Every plagued one of those 5 Ouija boards was calling my name. I felt my ears grow crimson, purple, maroon. My wife was looking at me as though I was some peculiar insect. The squeak of Ouija boards and the murmur of conversation rose louder and louder. And then I felt my face twitch in the spasm of that idiotic grin. I tried to straighten my wretched features into their semblance of humanity. I tried. And doesn't he look sly? Said Miss Hinkle. And then I got up and fled the room. I do not know how that party ended. I do not want to know. I went straight upstairs, undressed, and crawled into bed. I lay there while the front door shut and Lavinia's steps came up upstairs, past the bedroom door, and went to the guest room beyond. And then, after what seemed like an eternity, the clock struck 3, and I dozed off to sleep. At the breakfast table the next morning, there was no sign of my wife. I concluded she was sleeping late, but Glidolia, upon being questioned, only shook her head, muttered something, and went to the kitchen. I had hardly seated myself at the desk when there came a tap at the door and a white slip of paper slid under it. I unfolded it and read, Dear John, I'm going back to my grandmother. My lawyer will communicate with you. Oh, I cried. Oh, I wish I was dead. That's exactly what you ought to be, said that horrible voice from the other end of the room. See here, I said sternly. What do you mean by appearing here like this? I can't help it, said the voice, which seemed to come from a point about 5.5 feet above the shoes. I raised my eyes and presently distinguished her round, protruding mouth. Why can't you? A nice way to act, walking in sections. If you'll give me time, said the mouth in an exasperated voice, I assure you the rest of me will presently arrive. It is all your fault, she glared at me. My fault? Of course. How can you keep a lady up working all night and then expect her to retain all her faculties the next day? I'm just too tired to materialize. Then why did you bother? Because I was sent to ask when your wife is going to get rid of that PJ board. How should I know? I wish to heaven I'd never seen you. Look what you've done. You've lost me my wife. You've lost me my home, my happiness. You, Mr. Hollock, came from the hall outside. Mr. Hollock, I's going to quit. I don't like no hoodoos. And the steps retreated. You've even lost me my cook. I didn't come here to be abused, said the ghost coldly. And then the door opened and Lavinia entered. She wore the brown hat and coat she usually travels in and carried a suitcase which she set down on the floor. I have come to tell you that I am leaving, she staccatoed. Oh yes, I agreed, flapping my arms about to attract attention from the corner. That's fine, that's great. So you want me to go, do you? She demanded. Sure, yes, right away. Change of air will do you good. I'll join you presently. If only she would go till Helen could depart. I'd have the devil of a time explaining afterward, of course. But anything would be better than to have Lavinia see a ghost. Why, that sensitive little woman couldn't bear to have a mouse say boo to her. And what would she say to a ghost in her own living room? Lavinia cast a cold eye upon me. You are acting very queerly, she sniffed. You are concealing something from me. Just then the door opened and Gladolia called, Miss Hallock, Miss Hallock, I've come to tell you I's done left this place. My wife turned her head a moment. But why, Gladolia? I ain't staying round no place long with them Ouija board contraptions. I'm scared of hoodoos. I's done, I is. Is that all you've got to complain about? Lavinia inquired. Yes, ma'am. All right then. Go back to the kitchen. You can use the board for kindling wood. Who, me? Touch that thing? No, ma'am. Never, never, never. I'll be the coon to burn it, I shouted. I'll be glad to burn it. Gladolia's heavy steps moved off kitchenward. Then my Lavinia turned hospitally to me. John, there's not a bit of use trying to deceive me. What is it you are trying to conceal from me? Who, me? No, no. I lied, elaborately looking around to see if that ghost was concealed enough. She was so big, and I'm rather a smallish man, but that was a bad move on my part. John, Lavinia demanded like a ward boss, you are hiding somebody in here. Who is it? I only waved denial and gurgled in my throat. She went on. It's bad enough to have you flirt over the Ouija board with that hussy. She thrust me back with sudden muscle. I will see who's behind you. Where is that Helen? Me? I'm Helen, said the ghost. Lavinia looked at that apparition, that owl-eyed phantom in plaid skirt and stiff shirtwaist, with hair scooped back and no powder on her nose. I threw a protecting, husbandly arm about her to catch her when she should faint. But she didn't swoon. A broad, satisfied smile spread over her face. I thought you were Helen of Troy, she murmured. I used to be Helen of Troy, New York, said the ghost. And now I'll be moving along, if you'll excuse me. See you later. With that, she telescoped briskly till we only saw a hand waving goodbye. My Lavinia fell forgivingly into my arms. I kissed her once or twice fervently, and then I shoved her aside, for I felt a sudden strong desire to write. The sheets of paper on my desk spread invitingly before me. I've got the bulliest plot for a ghost story, I cried. So that's it. I know it was a little long, and I hope I didn't bore all of you. And where's Febby? Febby's aunt was enacting the role of that uh, ghost. Let me have some water. So, who all are there, please? I cannot read your comments. Lalit sir, thank you. Priyanka, Anshu, thanks for joining. Vinita, Santosh Di, Gauri, who else? I hope you liked the story. Hi, Vinita. You liked it. Thank you. Just have some water. Yeah, hi, Koshisa. I hope you liked it. Yeah, I tried my best. Yes, though sometimes. Oh, Sunil Kaushalji, thank you. I know it was long. Yeah, it was a great performance. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Who else is there? Sadbirdi. Hi, Vinita. Hi. And super. Okay. Yeah. So I think I've taken everybody's name. Swatanji Reddy. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I was in two minds because this story was a little long. So I was in two minds whether to take this or not. But I'm glad all of you enjoyed uh, hearing me read. Thank you. Thank you. So, uh, Febby is not here. I think he's taken the show.